I was standing in my backyard at 7 in the morning, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise paint my garden in shades of gold when I heard the unmistakable sound of heels clicking on my driveway. That sound alone was enough to make my stomach drop, because I knew exactly who it was before I even turned around. Sharon Whitmore, the president of our Willow Creek Estates Homeowners Association in suburban Phoenix, Arizona, had arrived, and judging by the early hour, she was here to make my day miserable. "Mr. Harrison Anderson." Her shrill voice cut through the peaceful morning like a knife through butter. I took a deep breath and turned around, forcing a smile onto my face. "Good morning, Sharon. Can I help you with something?" She was already marching toward my backyard gate, her clipboard clutched to her chest like a shield. She was probably in her late 40s, with that particular haircut that seemed to be a requirement for HOA board members. Short and styled with so much hairspray that not even a monsoon could move a single strand. Her blazer was crisp despite the early hour, and her expression was the same one I imagined Torquemada wore during the Spanish Inquisition. "Yes, you certainly can help me," she said, pushing through my gate without waiting for an invitation. "What on earth is that monstrosity?" She was pointing at my heat lamp. My beautiful, functional, absolutely necessary heat lamp that I had installed above my outdoor plant shelf last week. The shelf held my collection of tropical plants that I had spent the last 3 years cultivating. I had rare orchids, a few varieties of exotic ferns, and some hibiscus plants that cost me more than I cared to admit. "That's a heat lamp," I said slowly, as if explaining to a child. "For my plants." "I can see what it is," Sharon snapped. "The question is, why is it hanging in your backyard where everyone can see it?" "Well, everyone can't see it actually. It faces my house, not the street. And I need it because we are in February, and even though Phoenix winters are mild, these plants need consistent temperatures at night." Sharon flipped through her clipboard with the fury of someone who had been waiting their entire life for this moment. Section 7.4.2 of the Willow Creek Estates HOA bylaws clearly states that all outdoor fixtures must be approved by the board before installation. Did you submit a request? I felt my jaw tighten. "Sharon, it's a heat lamp. It's not even visible from the street. My backyard fence is 6 feet tall." "That is not the point, Harrison. Rules are rules. If we let everyone do whatever they want, this neighborhood would descend into chaos." She made a dramatic gesture as if she could see the chaos spreading across Willow Creek like a plague. "I'm giving you 48 hours to remove it, or the HOA will issue a fine of $100 per day." $100 per day. For a heat lamp that nobody can see and that isn't hurting anyone. Should have thought about that before you violated the bylaws. She turned on her heel and started walking away, then paused and looked back at me. "Oh, and Harrison, the next HOA meeting is this Thursday at 7. You're welcome to appeal this decision to the board, but I wouldn't get your hopes up." As I watched her leave, I realized my peaceful morning had been thoroughly destroyed. I looked at my plants, their leaves glossy and healthy under the warm glow of the lamp, and I knew I was not going to back down without a fight. I spent the rest of Sunday researching HOA laws in Arizona and reading through the entire Willow Creek Estates bylaws document. It was 163 pages of mind-numbing legalese that seemed designed to suck the joy out of homeownership. But I was determined to find something, anything, that would support my case. By Monday morning, I had found a few interesting points. First, Section 3.2 of the bylaws stated that any outdoor modification that was not visible from the street or neighboring properties did not require prior approval. Second, There was a clause about reasonable accommodations for plant life and landscaping that had been added 2 years ago after someone tried to ban vegetable gardens. Armed with this information, I decided to pay a visit to my neighbor, Tom Jenkins. Tom was a retired lawyer who had lived in Willow Creek for almost 15 years. If anyone knew how to deal with Sharon and her power trips, it would be him. Tom answered the door in his usual attire, cargo shorts and a faded ASU t-shirt. His white beard was neatly trimmed, and his eyes crinkled with amusement when he saw me. "Let me guess," he said before I could speak. "Sharon came knocking about something. How did you know?" "Because she was at my door last week complaining about my garden gnomes being aesthetically inconsistent with the neighborhood character." He laughed and gestured for me to come inside. "What did you do to earn her wrath?" I explained the situation while Tom poured us both coffee in his kitchen. He listened carefully, nodding occasionally and making notes on a legal pad. "Okay, so here's the thing," Tom said when I finished. "Sharon likes to throw her weight around, but the bylaws are actually on your side here. That Section 3.2 clause is pretty clear. If it's not visible from public areas, you don't need pre-approval." That's what I thought, but she's threatening daily fines. She can threaten all she wants. The board has to vote on any fine and they need to follow their own bylaws. My advice: show up to that meeting on Thursday with photos proving the lamp isn't visible from the street. Bring a copy of the bylaws with the relevant sections highlighted. And most importantly, stay calm. Sharon thrives on getting people emotional. I thanked Tom and headed home feeling slightly more confident. The rest of Monday and Tuesday passed uneventfully, which should have been my first warning that something was brewing. Wednesday afternoon, I received a certified letter in the mail. It was from the Willow Creek Estates HOA, and my stomach sank as I opened it. Inside was an official notice of violation and a fine schedule, but it was not for $100 per day as Sharon had threatened. It was for $500 per day, starting immediately, with a total of $1,500 already owed for Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. I read the letter 3 times, my blood pressure rising with each reading. This was insane. They were claiming that my heat lamp violated not just the pre-approval requirement, but also a noise ordinance, because the lamp had a small fan for cooling and an aesthetic standard, because it was industrial looking. I immediately called the HOA management office. A bored-sounding woman named Patricia answered. "I need to speak to someone about this violation notice I received," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "All violation notices must be appealed at the monthly board meeting," Patricia recited as if she had said it 1,000 times before. "The meeting is tomorrow, but this letter says I already owe $1,500. The fines begin from the date of initial violation notice, sir. You were noticed on Sunday, so you owe fines for Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. If you don't pay or remove the violation by end of business Friday, additional fines will continue to accrue. This is ridiculous. The lamp isn't even visible from the street. You'll need to bring that up at the meeting, sir. Is there anything else I can help you with?" I hung up, feeling like I had just argued with a robot. I immediately called Tom, who agreed to come to the Thursday meeting with me as moral support. Thursday evening arrived too slowly and too quickly at the same time. I spent the day at my job as a software developer, barely able to concentrate. My boss, a laid-back guy named Marcus, noticed my distraction and asked if everything was okay. I gave him the abbreviated version and he just shook his head. "HOA man, that's why I rent. Good luck with that." At 6:30, I met Tom in the parking lot of the community center where the HOA meetings were held. I had a folder full of printed photos showing my backyard from every possible street angle, proving the heat lamp was not visible. I also had the bylaws printed with relevant sections highlighted in yellow. "Remember," Tom said as we walked toward the building, "stay calm, stick to the facts, and don't let Sharon bait you into an argument." The community center meeting room was depressingly bland, with fluorescent lights, beige walls, and folding chairs arranged in rows facing a long table where the board members sat. Sharon was in the middle, naturally, flanked by 4 other board members I vaguely recognized from neighborhood events. About 20 other residents were scattered through the chairs. I recognized a few faces, including Mrs. Patterson from 3 houses down, who always smiled and waved, and the Gonzalez family who had recently moved in. Sharon called the meeting to order at 7 on the dot. She went through the usual preliminaries, reading minutes from the last meeting, discussing the budget for landscaping the common areas, and reminding everyone about the upcoming neighborhood block party. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only 30 minutes, she got to new business. "We have a violation appeal from Harrison Anderson," Sharon said, her voice taking on a tone that suggested she was discussing a particularly distasteful criminal. "Mr. Anderson has installed an unapproved outdoor fixture and refuses to remove it despite being given notice." "I would like to present my case," I said, standing up. My voice was steady, which surprised me given how fast my heart was beating. "You may approach the board," Sharon said with a dismissive wave. I walked to the front and laid out my photos on the table. These photos were taken from every possible street angle around my property. As you can see, the heat lamp in question is not visible from any public area. According to Section 3.2 of our bylaws, outdoor modifications that are not visible from the street or neighboring properties do not require pre-approval. One of the other board members, a man named Gerald Chen, picked up the photos and examined them. He looked like he was actually considering what I was saying, which gave me a flicker of hope. "Additionally," I continued, "the lamp is necessary for maintaining tropical plants that require consistent temperatures." Section 8.7 of the bylaws specifically allows for reasonable accommodations related to landscaping and plant care. "The lamp is industrial and unsightly," Sharon interrupted. "It's the kind of thing you'd see in a warehouse, not a residential neighborhood." "But it's not visible from anywhere except my own backyard," I repeated. "My backyard is my private space." "Nothing in Willow Creek Estates is truly private," Sharon said. "We maintain standards for a reason. Property values depend on everyone following the rules." "I am following the rules," I said, feeling my carefully maintained composure starting to crack. "The rules say I don't need approval for non-visible modifications." Gerald cleared his throat. "Sharon, he does have a point. Section 3.2 is pretty clear about this." "Section 3.2 has an exception for fixtures that could pose a safety hazard," Sharon shot back. "A heat lamp definitely qualifies." "How is a heat lamp a safety hazard? It's all listed, properly installed and designed for outdoor use. It could start a fire." "So could a grill, or a fire pit, or any number of things people have in their backyards that are actually visible from the street." Another board member, a woman named Linda Hoffman, spoke up. "I think we need to vote on this. Sharon, do you want to make a motion?" "I move that we uphold the violation and continue the fine schedule," Sharon said immediately. "I second," said another board member, a quiet man named Robert Price, who I was pretty sure had never had an original thought in his life. "All in favor?" Linda asked. Sharon, Robert, and one other member raised their hands. Gerald and Linda did not. "The motion passes 3-2, Linda said, though she looked uncomfortable. "The violation stands." I felt like I had been punched in the gut. "This is ridiculous. I'm following the bylaws." You're just choosing to ignore your own rules. Mr. Anderson, if you continue to be disruptive, I'll have you removed from this meeting, Sharon said. The board has made its decision. You have until end of business Friday to remove the heat lamp or the fines will continue. I gathered my photos with shaking hands and walked back to my seat. Tom leaned over and whispered, "We're going to fight this. Trust me." After the meeting ended, several neighbors approached me with sympathetic looks. Mrs. Patterson told me she thought the whole thing was ridiculous. The Gonzalez family's father, Miguel, said he had dealt with similar problems with Sharon when he tried to paint his garage door a slightly different shade of white than the pre-approved color. "She's on a power trip," Miguel said. "Someone needs to stand up to her." Tom and I regrouped in the parking lot. "Okay, here's what we're going to do," Tom said. "Tomorrow, you're going to hire a lawyer. I know a guy named David Park who specializes in HOA disputes. He's good and he's reasonable with his fees. In the meantime, don't remove the heat lamp. Let them rack up their fake fines. We're going to fight this and we're going to win. This is going to cost me a fortune, isn't it? Maybe. But if we win, the HOA has to pay your legal fees, and trust me, we're going to win. Sharon is violating her own bylaws, and that's going to bite her." Friday morning, I called David Park. His secretary scheduled me for an appointment that afternoon. I took a half-day off work and drove to his office in downtown Phoenix. David turned out to be a sharp-looking man in his mid-30s with wire-rimmed glasses and an office full of law books and potted plants. "I like your plants," I said as I sat down. He grinned. "Thanks. I actually heard about your case from Tom. He filled me in on the basics. Sounds like a pretty clear-cut case of HOA overreach." I walked him through everything, showing him the violation notices, the photos, and the relevant bylaws sections. He took notes and occasionally nodded. "Okay, so here's where we are," David said when I finished. "The HOA is clearly in the wrong. Section 3.2 is unambiguous. But Sharon sounds like the type who's going to dig in her heels, which means this might get ugly before it gets better. I'm going to draft a cease and desist letter today and send it to the HOA board. That will usually stop them in their tracks because they realize they are opening themselves up to liability. And if it doesn't stop them, then we file a lawsuit. Arizona has pretty strong protections for homeowners against HOA abuse. We can sue for declaratory relief, which means asking a judge to declare that you're in compliance with the bylaws. We can also sue for damages if the HOA acts in bad faith, which they clearly are. How much is this going to cost? My retainer is $3,000. If we have to go to court, it could be more. But like I said, if we win, the HOA has to pay your legal fees and costs. Cases like this usually settle pretty quickly once the HOA realizes they're going to lose. I wrote the check, trying not to think about how this stupid heat lamp was now costing me thousands of dollars. But I was too angry to back down. This was about principle now. David was as good as his word. By Monday morning, he had sent a detailed cease and desist letter to the HOA board and their management company. The letter laid out exactly how the HOA was violating its own bylaws and warned that continued harassment would result in a lawsuit. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. Tuesday evening, I came home from work to find a violation notice stapled to my front door. This time, they were claiming my lawn had weeds and that my house number was faded and hard to read. I walked around my property, looking for these supposed violations. My lawn was immaculate. I paid a service to maintain it, and my house number was a brass fixture that I had cleaned just 2 weeks ago. I took photos of everything and emailed them to David. He called me back within an hour. "They're retaliating," he said. This is actually good for us in a legal sense. It shows a pattern of harassment. I'm going to amend our complaint to include these new violations. We're going to file suit tomorrow. This is insane. Can they really just make up violations? They can try, but it's not going to end well for them. Trust me, Harrison. We've got this. Wednesday morning, David filed a lawsuit in Maricopa County Superior Court against the Willow Creek Estates Homeowners Association. The complaint asked the court to declare that I was in compliance with the HOA bylaws, to enjoin the HOA from assessing any further fines, and to award damages for harassment and bad faith enforcement of the rules. I thought filing the lawsuit would finally make Sharon back off. Instead, it seemed to enrage her further. Thursday morning, I woke up to find that someone had filed a complaint with the City of Phoenix Code Enforcement claiming that my heat lamp was an unpermitted electrical installation. A city inspector showed up at my door at 8 in the morning. The inspector, a tired-looking man named Rodriguez, seemed apologetic. "I'm sorry to bother you, sir. We got a complaint about an electrical violation. Mind if I take a look?" I showed him the heat lamp. He examined the installation, checked that it was properly grounded, and looked at the manufacturer's specifications. "This is fine," he said. "It's a plug-in unit, so it doesn't require a permit. Whoever called this in wasted everyone's time. Can you tell me who filed the complaint?" "Anonymous complaint," Rodriguez said, but his expression suggested he knew exactly who it was. "Between you and me, we get a lot of calls from HOA disputes. People use us as weapons against their neighbors. It's ridiculous." After Rodriguez left, I called David and told him what happened. "That's harassment," David said. "Possibly even abuse of process. I'm adding it to our complaint. Sharon is digging herself into a very deep hole." The next few weeks were a blur of legal motions and counter-motions. The HOA hired their own lawyer, a slick guy named Kenneth Morrison who specialized in defending HOA boards. He filed a motion to dismiss our lawsuit, claiming that we had not exhausted our administrative remedies with the HOA. David filed a response pointing out that we had appeared at the board meeting and been denied, which was all the administrative process the bylaws required. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Judge Patricia Santos, denied the motion to dismiss and set a hearing date for 3 weeks out. During this time, Sharon's campaign of petty harassment continued. I received violation notices for my trash cans being visible from the street on a non-collection day, even though they were in my side yard behind a gate. I got cited for parking my car in my driveway overnight, supposedly a violation even though half the neighborhood did the same thing. Each violation came with a threat of fines. I documented everything, took photos, and sent it all to David. He assured me that every new violation just made our case stronger. The stress was getting to me. I was having trouble sleeping and my work performance was suffering. Marcus, my boss, pulled me aside one day and asked if I needed some time off. "This HOA thing is really getting to you, isn't it?" He said. "It's just so stupid," I said. "All of this over a heat lamp. I keep thinking I should just remove it and be done with this whole mess." "But then they win," Marcus said, "and people like that HOA president will just keep doing this to other people. Sometimes you have to fight, even when it's hard." He was right, of course. I was not just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for every homeowner who had ever been bullied by an out-of-control HOA. The week before our court hearing, Tom came over with interesting news. He had been doing some digging into Sharon's history as HOA president, and he had found something significant. "Look at this," Tom said, spreading documents on my kitchen table. They were HOA financial records from the past 2 years. "See these expenses for landscaping." Sharon's brother-in-law owns a landscaping company, and he's been getting all the HOA contracts. But look at these prices compared to market rates. He's charging almost double what other companies bid. I studied the documents. Tom was right. The HOA had paid Sharon's brother-in-law over $50,000 in the past 2 years for work that should have cost maybe $30,000. That's a conflict of interest, I said. Probably illegal. Definitely against the bylaws, Tom said. Section 12.3 requires board members to disclose any financial relationships with vendors. Sharon never disclosed this. She's been funneling HOA money to her family. We need to give this to David. I called David immediately. He was very interested in what we had found. This is great, David said. It establishes that Sharon has a pattern of flouting the bylaws when it suits her. It also might be fraud. I'm going to bring this up at the hearing. The hearing was scheduled for Monday morning at 9. I barely slept the night before. David had prepared me for what to expect, but I was still nervous. I had never been involved in a lawsuit before. The Maricopa County Superior Court building was an imposing modern structure in downtown Phoenix. David met me in the lobby, looking confident in his dark suit. "Ready?" he asked. "As ready as I'll ever be." We rode the elevator to the 6th floor and found the courtroom. Kenneth Morrison was already there with Sharon and 2 other board members, Gerald and Linda. Sharon looked like she was ready for battle, her expression grim and determined. Judge Santos took the bench promptly at 9. She was a woman in her early 50s with short gray hair and sharp eyes that suggested she did not tolerate nonsense. "This is a hearing on plaintiff's motion for declaratory relief and injunction," Judge Santos said. "Mr. Park, you may proceed." David stood and laid out our case clearly and concisely. He showed the photos proving the heat lamp was not visible from the street. He cited the relevant bylaws sections. He presented evidence of the retaliatory violations that had been filed after I challenged the original violation. Then he brought up the financial records Tom had found. "Your Honor, the evidence shows that the HOA president, Sharon Whitmore, has been awarding contracts to her brother-in-law's company without disclosure and at inflated prices. This demonstrates a pattern of disregarding the HOA's own bylaws when it's convenient for her. She's applying one standard to herself and another to homeowners like Mr. Anderson." Kenneth Morrison objected, claiming the financial records were not relevant to the heat lamp issue. Judge Santos overruled him. "It goes to credibility and pattern of behavior," Judge Santos said. "I'll allow it." Morrison did his best to defend the HOA's position, but he was fighting an uphill battle. He tried to argue that the heat lamp was a safety hazard, but Judge Santos cut him off. "Counsel, I've reviewed the evidence. This is a listed outdoor heat lamp properly installed. Unless you have evidence of an actual safety issue, I'm not interested in speculation." Morrison tried another angle, arguing that the HOA had broad discretion to enforce aesthetic standards. "The bylaws give the board discretion," Morrison said, "and the board exercised that discretion in good faith." "Good faith?" Judge Santos looked skeptical. "Mr. Park has presented evidence of multiple retaliatory violations filed after Mr. Anderson challenged the original violation. That doesn't look like good faith to me." After 2 hours of arguments, Judge Santos called for a brief recess. When we returned, she had made her decision. "I find that Mr. Anderson is in compliance with the HOA bylaws," Judge Santos said. Section 3.2 clearly states that non-visible modifications do not require pre-approval. The heat lamp in question is not visible from any public area. The HOA's attempt to fine Mr. Anderson for this installation is not supported by its own governing documents. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Furthermore, Judge Santos continued, the evidence of retaliatory enforcement is troubling. The court will issue an injunction prohibiting the HOA from assessing any fines related to the heat lamp. The court also orders the HOA to rescind all violations filed against Mr. Anderson after the initial heat lamp violation, as they appear to be retaliatory in nature. Sharon's face had gone pale. Finally, Judge Santos said, looking directly at Sharon, the court is concerned about the evidence of financial irregularities presented by the plaintiff. While that is not directly at issue in this case, the court strongly encourages the HOA board to conduct an independent audit of its finances, and to ensure that all board members are in compliance with conflict of interest provisions. Judge Santos ruled that the HOA had to pay my legal fees and court costs, which had totaled just over $8,000 by that point. She also ordered the HOA to pay me $5,000 in damages for harassment and bad faith enforcement. As we left the courtroom, Sharon tried to walk past me without making eye contact, but I stepped in her path. "Sharon, this didn't have to happen," I said quietly. "All you had to do was follow your own rules." She glared at me. "This isn't over. I'm still president of this board, and I'll be watching everything you do." "Actually," Gerald said, stepping forward, "we need to have a board meeting, Sharon. A special meeting to discuss some concerns that have come up." Sharon looked at Gerald with surprise and something like fear. "What concerns?" "The financial concerns the judge mentioned. Linda and I have been talking, and we think it's time for a change in leadership." Over the next few days, I learned what happened from Tom, who had his ear to the ground in the neighborhood. Gerald and Linda had called an emergency board meeting and demanded Sharon's resignation as president. When she refused, they called for a vote of no confidence. Sharon lost 3-2, with only her and Robert voting in her favor, but it got better. The board voted to conduct the independent audit Judge Santos had suggested. When the auditor's report came back 2 weeks later, it revealed that Sharon had not only given preferential contracts to her brother-in-law, but had also been using HOA funds to pay for personal expenses. She had charged over $12,000 in personal expenses to the HOA credit card over the past 18 months, including dinners, shopping trips, and even a weekend vacation to Sedona. That was when things got really serious. Gerald, now the acting president, contacted the Arizona Attorney General's office. Financial fraud involving an HOA is a criminal matter in Arizona, and the Attorney General's office took it seriously. 2 investigators showed up at Sharon's house on a Wednesday morning. I happened to be working from home that day and saw them arrive. They were there for over 3 hours, leaving with several boxes of documents. Tom called me that evening with an update. They arrested Sharon this afternoon, charged her with theft, fraud, and breach of fiduciary duty. Her brother-in-law was arrested too for his part in the scheme. I felt a strange mix of emotions. On one hand, I was glad that Sharon was being held accountable. On the other hand, it seemed almost sad that it had come to this. All of this had started because she could not stand the idea of someone in her neighborhood doing something she had not approved, even when the rules clearly allowed it. The criminal case moved faster than I expected. Sharon's lawyer tried to work out a plea deal, but the Attorney General's office was not interested in going easy on her. HOA fraud cases had been a growing problem in Arizona, and they wanted to send a message. The trial was held in late May, about 4 months after the whole mess started. I was called as a witness to testify about the retaliatory violations and the pattern of harassment. Sharon's brother-in-law, A man named Dennis Whitmore, who looked like he wished he could disappear, testified that Sharon had approached him about the landscaping contracts and had promised him steady work in exchange for kicking back 20% of the contract value to her personally. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. They found Sharon guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced her to 18 months in prison and ordered her to pay restitution of over $60,000 to the HOA and to reimburse the costs of the audit and legal fees. As the bailiff led Sharon out of the courtroom in handcuffs, she looked at me one last time. There was no defiance left in her expression, just defeat and regret. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Life in Willow Creek Estates slowly returned to normal after that. Gerald served as acting president until the annual HOA election, where he was officially elected president. One of his first acts was to propose amending the bylaws to add more checks and balances, and to limit the president's unilateral authority. The amendment passed with overwhelming support from the homeowners. People had been watching what happened to me, and had realized that the same thing could happen to them if the board had too much unchecked power. My heat lamp continued to do its job, keeping my tropical plants happy and healthy through the remainder of the winter and into spring. My orchids bloomed beautifully that year, producing more flowers than they ever had before. I like to think they were celebrating the victory too. Tom and I became good friends through the whole ordeal. We started having coffee together on weekend mornings, sitting in my backyard under the warmth of my heat lamp, talking about everything from local politics to philosophy. He told me stories about his legal career and the various cases he had worked on. I told him about my work in software development and my dreams of maybe starting my own company someday. Miguel Gonzalez and his family became friends too. His wife, Rosa, brought over homemade tamales one evening as a thank you for standing up to Sharon. She told me that Sharon had made their first year in Willow Creek miserable with constant complaints and violations, and they had been considering moving. Now that Sharon was gone, they felt like they could finally relax and enjoy their home. "You did a good thing," Miguel said, "not just for yourself, but for all of us." The lawsuit and criminal case attracted some local media attention. A reporter from the Arizona Republic wrote a feature story about HOA overreach and used my case as the centerpiece. The article quoted me saying, "Homeowners associations serve an important purpose, but they need to remember that they exist to serve the community, not to control it." The moment an HOA board starts thinking of homeowners as subjects instead of neighbors, that's when things go wrong. The article was picked up by a few national outlets, and suddenly, I was getting calls from people all over the country who had their own HOA horror stories. A producer from a cable news network even reached out asking if I wanted to be interviewed for a segment on HOA reform. I politely declined. I had never wanted to be a public figure. I just wanted to take care of my plants in peace. David Park and I stayed in touch too. He told me that my case had become something of a legend in HOA law circles. Law professors were using it as a teaching example of HOA overreach and bad faith enforcement. David had also gotten several new clients who were dealing with similar situations, and had found him through news coverage of my case. "You started something," David said when we met for lunch one day. "People are paying attention now. HOAs are going to have to be more careful about how they treat homeowners." As summer arrived and the Phoenix heat became intense, my outdoor plants thrived. The heat lamp was no longer necessary during the day, but I kept it running at night when temperatures could still drop significantly in the desert. My orchids produced bloom after bloom, and my hibiscus plants grew lush and full. I expanded my collection, adding some rare bromeliads and a few varieties of passion flower that I had always wanted to try growing. My backyard became something of a showcase, and neighbors would sometimes ask if they could come see the plants. I always said yes. I had learned the hard way that sharing joy was better than hoarding it. The new HOA board under Gerald's leadership was night and day different from Sharon's regime. They focused on actual community improvement rather than petty enforcement. They organized neighborhood cleanup days, started a community garden in one of the common areas, and even created a committee to review and update the bylaws to remove outdated or overly restrictive provisions. I was asked to serve on the bylaws review committee, which I accepted. We spent 6 months going through the bylaws line by line, identifying provisions that were unclear, contradictory, or unnecessarily restrictive. We streamlined the approval process for outdoor modifications, created clear standards for what did and did not require board approval, and added provisions protecting homeowners from retaliatory enforcement. The revised bylaws were presented to the membership for a vote in November. They passed with 85% approval. Several homeowners came up to me at the meeting to thank me for my work on the committee. 1 year after the whole mess started, I was standing in my backyard on a cool February morning, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise. My heat lamp glowed softly above my plant shelf, and everything was peaceful. I heard footsteps behind me and turned, momentarily tensing before I realized it was just Mrs. Patterson from down the street. "Morning, Harrison," she said with a smile. "I hope you don't mind me walking through. My dog got loose and I think he ran back here." "No problem at all," I said. "I'll help you look." We found her small terrier sniffing around my orchids, and I scooped him up and handed him back to her. "Thank you," she said, "and thank you for everything else too. This neighborhood is so much better now. I used to be afraid to do anything with my yard because Sharon would find something wrong with it. Now I actually enjoy being outside." After she left, I stood there thinking about how strange the past year had been. What had started as a simple dispute about a heat lamp had turned into a legal battle, a criminal case, and ultimately a transformation of how our entire community operated. I thought about Sharon sometimes and wondered how she was doing. She had been released from prison after serving 9 months of her sentence and was on probation. I had heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she had moved to Tucson to live with her sister. I hoped she had learned something from the experience, though I was not particularly optimistic. The whole experience had taught me some important lessons. I had learned that standing up for yourself matters, even when it's hard and expensive and stressful. I had learned that communities function best when there's a balance between order and freedom, between rules and flexibility. And I had learned that the people you think are your adversaries can sometimes become your friends when you fight alongside them for a common cause. My orchids bloomed again that spring, more profusely than ever. I entered one of them in a local flower show and won second place. The judge, an elderly woman who had been growing orchids for 40 years, asked me about my growing conditions. "I keep them outside under a heat lamp," I said. "It gives them the consistent temperature they need." "Smart," she said. "So many people try to grow tropicals indoors here and wonder why they struggle. Your plant is obviously very happy." As I drove home from the flower show with my second-place ribbon, I thought about how something as simple as a heat lamp had changed my life. It had forced me out of my comfort zone, taught me to fight for what was right, and ultimately connected me more deeply with my community. I still work as a software developer, still live in my house in Willow Creek Estates, and still grow exotic plants in my backyard under my heat lamp. But I'm more aware now of the small tyrannies that can exist in everyday life and the importance of pushing back against them. Tom and I still have our weekend coffee sessions. Last Saturday, he told me about another homeowner in a different subdivision who was having problems with their HOA. They had installed solar panels without permission and were being threatened with fines. I gave them David's number, Tom said. Told them about your case. I think they're going to fight it. Good, I said. Someone has to. Gerald continues to serve as HOA president, and he's doing an excellent job. The neighborhood has never been more united or more relaxed. People actually talk to each other now, instead of suspiciously eyeing each other's properties for violations. Last month, the board voted to create a Neighborhood Beautification Award to recognize homeowners who go above and beyond in maintaining their properties. The first award was given to Mrs. Patterson for her rose garden. The second went to Miguel for his vegetable garden. And the third, to my surprise and delight, went to me for my tropical plant collection. Gerald presented me with a small plaque at the monthly meeting. This is for showing us that passion and dedication to something you love can make the whole community better, he said. And for reminding us all that rules should serve people, not the other way around. As I sit here tonight, writing this all down, my heat lamp glows softly in the darkness outside my window. It's just a simple piece of equipment, no different from thousands of others used by gardeners around the world. But to me, it represents something more. It represents the right to pursue your passions, to take care of the things you love, and to stand up against unreasonable authority. My plants are thriving, my community is healthier than ever, and I've made friends I never would have made otherwise. All because I refused to remove a heat lamp when someone demanded it without good reason. Sharon is gone, paying for her crimes and hopefully learning from them. The HOA has been reformed and now operates in a way that actually serves its members. And I've learned that sometimes the smallest battles can have the biggest impacts. I wouldn't recommend going through what I went through. The stress, the expense, the time and energy required to fight back against an unjust system are all very real costs. But I also wouldn't change it. Because at the end of the day, I stood up for myself and for what was right, and that matters. As I finish writing this and prepare to turn in for the night, I take one last look at my backyard. The heat lamp casts a warm glow over my plants, and I can see new buds forming on one of my orchids. Tomorrow morning, I'll wake up and have my coffee while I check on them, just like I do every morning. And if someone ever tries to tell me I can't take care of my plants again, I'll know exactly what to do. But I don't think anyone will. We've all learned our lesson in one way or another. The community is better for it, and so am I.